finally, the leader of the pack, Rossi, has arrived, and what is up with that damage? But that's not the only thing she's capable of, and in this Rossi guide video, I am going to cover everything you need to know about her, including best teams, rotations, weapons, and gear. So let's see what she's all about. Alright, Rossina basically can be utilized in quite a few different teams. You can either play her in physical-centric comps, since she can apply a lot of vulnerability stacks, plus she can also force enemies to take increased physical and heat damage, or she can dish out a ton of damage as a hyper carry, when utilizing her ultimate and various critical stat buffs she gains. But regardless of how you decide to use this tiny Italian, we first need to go over her kit. And starting with basic attacks, they are quite basic. The combo is made up of 5 hits, last hit being of course Final Strike, and interestingly enough, you can cover a lot of movement range by just cancelling her Final Strike. Alright, next we have the battle skill, which has 2 different versions. By default, it will deal some damage and apply lift status on the enemy, which also counts as vulnerability. However, if the enemy already has vulnerability on them, then she still applies lift, but now also summons these cool Spirit Wolves, which will deal heat damage. If that's not enough, her first passive talent also gets triggered by these wolves, and they will apply a Razor Claw mark on the enemy for 25 seconds. This is a damage over time or DOT status, and each second it ticks, it deals physical damage, which can also cause a critical strike, which can also help her with maintaining equipment buffs such as her signature or MI security gear set. Finally, and this is the most important part, Razor Claw marked enemies will also take 12% increased physical and heat damage, so quite a powerful debuff. It's also important to note that her battle skill helps generate more energy when triggering its stronger version with the Spirit Wolves, so the game highly incentivizes to use Rossi's battle skill on enemies who already have vulnerability stacks on them. Okay, next on the agenda is combo skill. In order to trigger it, the enemy must have Art's Infliction and vulnerability applied on them at the same time. So for example, if the enemy already has vulnerability, and then I use Akakuri to apply Heat Infliction, Rossi's combo pops up. And this combo is quite unique because after triggering it initially, she will consume all Art's Inflictions on the enemy, applies lift, and then it goes into next sequence, where her combo shows up again. This time it's a small minigame, where if you press the button when the circle is shiny, you can then apply another stack of vulnerability. Also, depending on how many Art's Inflictions Rossi consumed, her combo damage will be increased. But arguably, the most important thing she gains after triggering her combo's second sequence is the 25% crit rate and 50% critical damage boost she gains for 15 seconds. And the good news are, if you missed the shiny circle timing, you still get this buff. The only benefit you gain from perfectly timing the second sequence of combo is the additional stack of vulnerability. Finally, this leaves us with the ultimate. It costs 110 energy, and once it's casted, Rossi unleashes the might of her Red Riding Hood power by delivering a ton of damage. And at the end of it, she also applies 1 stack of heat onto the enemy. Plus, the ultimate gains 60% critical damage boosts. So yeah, thanks to the claw mark the enemy will have, this will let her ultimate deal plus 110% critical damage. Quite insane. But I also didn't mention this yet, Rossi's other passive talent called Seething Blood boosts her battle skill, combo skill, and ultimate's heat damage by 24% if she's attacking an enemy with the Razor Claw marked status. On top of that, she also gets healed from this passive too. And then finally, if the enemy has combustion on them, the damage and healing is multiplied by 1.5 times. Still, it does seem like this Seething Blood damage is a separate number from everything else, so it won't benefit, for example, from ultimate's 60% crit damage boost, or if you give her the Link boost. However, since the ultimate hits so many times, that Seething Blood number also pops up along with it, so it's still a very good passive. Overall, Rossi's playstyle is quite simple. You can follow this default rotation by first applying Vulnerable onto the enemy, preferably if someone else can do it, then use her skill to apply Razor Claw marked status, then apply Art's Infliction, and trigger her combo to obtain massive crit buffs, and then unleash her ultimate, preferably after other buffs from teammates have been activated. Otherwise, some other tips would be to swap to another unit when Rossi is using both her skill and combo, since they can take quite a long time to finish the animation, and you should be able to squeeze in a Final Strike while she's doing her animations. Oh, and since her combo is made up of 2 sequences, the second sequence can be queued up if you do things fast enough. For example, Wolfguard here can still hit the enemy before Rossi consumes heat, and same goes for Endmin's Originium Crystals, which makes me especially happy since, I don't know, I kinda like Endmin's simple but quite the front-loaded damage. Anyway, let's talk about Rossi's build next. Now, when it comes to skill leveling priority, obviously just raise everything to level 9 first, and then the priority should be ultimate first, since this is where she dishes out the most damage, followed by combos since its cooldown can be shortened by 1 second, and then finally go with battle skill and basics. By the way, I captured the footage here on Creator's server, so keep in mind a lot of the things I will talk about are still in very early stages of theory crafting, so please excuse me for the work in progress situation, but I'll update you guys with a pinned comment if there's any major discoveries or changes. Anyway, next, let's talk about the Rossi's gear options. Since she scales with agility and intellect, you'll want these substats on the gear and weapon, but she's also just like Yvonne, and critical damage and critical rate stats are super valuable for her, which is why the 3-piece MI security set is going to be her best option. The base set I went with is made up of MI security armor T1 and 2 MI security scopes T1s. As for the gloves, I got myself Redeemer gloves. It provides a big chunk of agility and improves her ultimate damage, but you could easily just go with MI security gloves T1. The thing is, if this isn't the first guide you're watching from me, you'll know that there are so many loadout options to go for when it comes to an offset piece. Most of the calcs right now are within a couple of % from each other, and as long as the offset piece has agility, intellect, and some offensive stat, I mean, you're good. But some notable offset pieces worth mentioning, I guess, would be Link Slab and Redeemer Seal. The latter being a useful choice if you want to trigger her ultimate with roughly 400 skill points. But yeah, all of her damage will more or less deal critical damage. And if I ever want to, in some scenarios, trigger her ultimate more often in exchange for some damage loss, I'd go for Redeemer Seal. Keep in mind, MI Security Armor T1 already provides a bit of energy, since even with just 16% ultimate gain efficiency, she can reach some decent energy breakpoints. Anyway, let's talk about weapons next. I'm just gonna throw the weapon rankings table at you here. Keep in mind, I was told the calcs were done on a nuke rotation, and so check the notes on the right side of the table. But starting with her signature Lupine Scarlet, it's got all the stats this little menace would ever want. However, regarding the passive ability, when causing critical damage, she gains a stack and she needs 16 stacks total, which sounds like a lot, and it can be sometimes. But keep in mind, her Razor Claw Mark DOT also counts its damage for the stacks. So sometimes maybe when she gains the 20-second buff from the 16 stacks from the weapon might not line up with her ultimate, but for my testing, it should be fine. Overall, this weapon ends up performing best in longer fights. Now, the next in line would be Battle Pass weapon Glorious Memory. It's about 6 to 12% worse when max refined when compared to her signature, but keep in mind, as it says in the notes, it becomes worse on longer rotations. Still, a very good free-to-play option to go for if you're planning on getting it from the Battle Pass each time. Otherwise, there's Rapid Ascent, but it's only good during the ultimate and when the enemy is staggered, so not that great in other situations. There's also Umbral Torch, but it requires your team to utilize Combustion or Corrosion. Basically, we use Ardelia, but even then, it's not that great. All in all, Signature is the best, and then Battle Pass weapon Glorious Memory is a really great free-to-play option to go for. So, Rossi has one big problem. She works with almost everyone, suffering from success, I guess. See, the thing is, we've been theory crafting like crazy over the weekend, and it just seems like you can put her into any team, and she will find some synergy to work with, and even help enable others deal better damage if they are physical or heat damaging unit. Still, because I got early access and there's not many people to compare results to, I really want to emphasize here, everything I'm about to tell you is still work in progress. Anyway, with the disclaimer out of the way, the main idea when selecting Rossi's teammates comes down to a few simple suggestions. First, it's quite valuable to have someone else who can apply Vulnerable for free, such as Gilberta's combo, since this allows you to save 100 SP, and then Rossi can immediately trigger her Claw Mark on enemy. Another good approach is to have at least one teammate who can apply any type of Arts Infliction, preferably Heat, since if you can cause combustion afterwards, then her passive damage improves. And then finally, since she has strong DPS, providing hyper buffs to her is a good idea. So for example, this team of Gilberta, Akakuri, and Perlica is really strong, but you can also swap out Perlica with Ardelia if you want more sustain, although Ardelia also helps increase both physical and art susceptibility. Wolfguard, on the other hand, can also replace Akakuri. Even if the team ends up with less SP generation, he has one neat trick where he can apply combustion from ultimate, and this can be nice for Rossi's passive ability damage increase. However, both Akakuri and Gilberta can also easily achieve this together. Or if you simply want to go pure free-to-play route, something like Akakuri, Antal, and Perlica is honestly quite good as well, especially since it's not that hard to play the team as well. But if you want it to be more physical-centric, you could go with something like Pogranichnik, Ardelia, and Wolfguard. Honestly, you can look at this quick cheat sheet. Just be warned, it doesn't cover all the options. And there is right now this theory that vulnerability spenders such as Dapan or Endman aren't as optimal as by just simply using other units that can buff instead of doing sub DPS. But again, it's early calcs as of now. Otherwise, if we look at each teammate individually, starting with Gilberta, she's basically one of the best options for the team. Since her ultimate buff becomes better with more vulnerability stacks, she also by default lets Rossi enjoy 7% ultimate gain efficiency, and she also works great with Perlica as well. And speaking of which, I probably don't have to tell you, but Perlica still remains one of the best supports in the game due to her electrification debuff she can apply from the combo. Same goes for Akakuri, great SP generation, great buffs, and she can also help apply Arts Infliction if nobody else on the team can do it. But just like with Levitain, Wolfguard can kick Akakuri out of the team, and while that means less SP for everyone, he can apply 2 stacks of heat and forcibly apply combustion from ultimate, which helps with buffing Rossi's abilities. Plus, it's her big brother. How can you say no? Now, as for some physical teammate options, Panda is decent as vulnerability spender, and he can consume it all with his combo. And then Endman can provide some attack buffs and deal some nice damage with the crystals, so a good budget option if you're an Endman believer. Otherwise, there's Pogranichnik, who can apply Breach on enemy, but that also means he consumes vulnerability, even though he can also help with recovering SP. But if you don't want to consume anything, then Chen can simply help with more stacks while also remaining SP friendly. And then there's Ember, who is sort of a replacement for Gilberta if you don't have her, but if all you really want is sustain, Ardelia can do that job too. Finally, if you built Tong Tong previously, she can work with Rossi too. That's the thing. Anyone can work with Rossi. The setup is simple. Have anyone apply any type of Arts Infliction, and this basically powers up like 90% of Rossi's kit. But yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to teams. Let's talk about your financial situation. Do you really need those extra potentials? Well, I'm not here to judge, I guess. Let's go through them. So, Rossi's first potential lets her deal a bit more damage, and she can regain a tiny bit more SP from the skill. As you can see, the power gain is whatever, and ironically enough, second potential might look boring by just adding some stats, but it ends up about as good as the third potential, which improves Seething Blood. Fourth potential essentially lets you swap out energy chests with better offensive stats, and then final fifth potential is going to boost up ultimate's damage by quite a lot, resulting in the biggest power growth for her. But that's for Oil Princess to think about. Rossi is absolutely great even with no potentials activated. The math checks out even now, and she's basically one of the best DPS units in the game. She can fit into so many teams, and she's got a great attitude towards wolves. So she's a great character to pull for. I don't know what else to tell you other than don't forget to subscribe and press like on this video. Okay, bye!